And here we go. Coffee Talk Live at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube. For those of you who are listening and not watching Coffee Talk Live, I see Helter, I see Dragon, I see Fluke Man has joined us. And of course, I try to read as many comments as I can. For those who are listening and not watching, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Where I am, it is afternoon. It is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for those of you who can see, here is Uncle. Uncle doesn't care. He's not going to even look at the camera. Uncle, the world's biggest cat. Probably not, but he's big enough. Big old boy. Visiting me here today, and you can see Dusty laying on the chair in the background there. There's Bingo. There's John. He says Cat Shepherd Division. Lorcanine King, if I pronounce that correctly, is here joining us today. Thanks for popping in. You want to get down? Is that what it is, buddy? See what I have to deal with? Look at this. All right. Here, I'll put you down. There you go. You're all right. Uncle's a big baby. He didn't start off that way, but that's where he is now. We'll be diving into the news here in a moment, taking a look at some various news stories and picking them apart. I do have a bit of an announcement, and I will make that announcement here in a moment. Just give a few people a chance to chime in. Also, I remind you, I can be found on the podcasting service Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com, on the Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and apparently Friday at noon now as well. So 5 days a week, you can find me on Fistful of Radio. Check it out. Please do show some support if you can, and check out some of their other material. You may find something interesting. For you as we get going here. Yeah, there goes Uncle. Basically, and I'll announce this again later on, tomorrow. Yeah, John, he says, let me guess, the world is crazy. Yeah, the world's not crazy. The people are. That's the problem. That's the thing. Life isn't, people say life is hard, and I get that, but is it hard, or do people just make it that much harder? Ultimately, getting a little philosophical there. Tomorrow, there'll be a little bit of a format change, because tomorrow I'm going to have to do this earlier in the day if I'm going to get it done, because I have back-to-back dental appointments. So rather than being on at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to have to do it at like 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or else I'm not going to be able to do it. Basically, I have a broken tooth. And so tomorrow I got to go in for a cleaning. And then after the cleaning, they want to put a cap on it, which is better than the alternative, because desperate enough, I went to Walmart Dental some time ago, some months back, and they told me the tooth couldn't be salvaged, and they wanted to refer me to somebody to pull it. And I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not a dentist, but 1, the tooth doesn't hurt. 2, it's not loose. And 3, the gums are healthy. So there's no infection. So why would we destroy this tooth? Because that's anything being pulled off of, removed from, cut away from your body is going to cause trauma. So you're causing trauma. There's a risk of infection, risk of a dry socket. Plus, it would be real expensive for me to get the tooth pulled, because it's like here. It's way back on the bottom that a piece broke off of. So you can't pull that. It's got to be chipped out, which means anesthesia. It's going to get expensive. So I go to another dentist, and they're like, yeah, actually, this can be capped. So screw you, Walmart Dental. But regardless of that, I've got to be I'm going to be there from noon to God knows when, and I don't think I'm going to make it here. Um, I don't make so tomorrow it's going to be 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's like yeah another regardless. I'm glad I'll be able to salvage the tooth, but another expense I didn't want to have to deal with because that's still going to be expensive, and it's like you never feel like you can get ahead sometimes. John says earlier is okay with him. Lorcanine says people definitely make things more difficult than necessary. Very true. Monkey says, did you see that some young climate activists, literal kids in Montana, won their case against the state of Montana? I did hear that. I didn't pull that story up, but I did hear that. That's all propaganda. That's all propaganda. Kids didn't decide to sue the state, and I wonder how long before the whole like climate agenda comes to a head because it's not true. A lot of it is not true. Bingo says earlier is cool as me with me. I always miss the last few minutes anyway. Preparedness is here. Urban is here. Thanks for joining us. And I'll repeat that announcement later for people who came in late and probably did not hear any of that to let them know that tomorrow again it will be earlier. It will be earlier because I'll be getting that tooth worked on, which again, like I said, another expense I didn't need to deal with. Hey, working on your teeth, dental work is not cheap. And it's considered cosmetic, which is why a lot of insurance companies won't cover it, even though oral hygiene attributes to your overall physical health. A lot of things can get worse in your body if you don't have good oral hygiene. As we delve into some of these news stories, and we'll start off with the so-called migrant crisis. It is kind of a crisis, actually. And this comes from something called Everyday Chirp. Way too many news agencies out there now. Everyday Chirp. And, it's funny enough is when you trace it, almost all of them are owned by the same couple of companies. New York City migrants live it up. There's nothing they stop us from doing. I bet you never would have guessed. Never would have guessed, would you, folks? That they are basically running over out there and getting away with murder. Venezuelan migrant staying at a migrant hotel at the McCarran Place Center in New York City recently spoke positively of his experience to the New York Post. This interview comes shortly after Mayor Eric Adams declared a state of emergency over the growing migrant crisis in the city. They treat us very well, quote, said 39-year-old Miguel Mujia. I think I pronounced that right. There's nothing they stop us from doing. Mujia brought his family to the pool at the center, saying we all swam between 12 and 5 p.m. It's a very nice pool. Oh, man. 5 hours of swimming. That must be nice. Mujia crossed the southern border into Texas before going to New York City. The city attracted him because, quote, this is where the shelters are. He also mentioned that he earns between $700 and $800 a week, equivalent to a roughly $40,000 annual cash salary, untaxed, by working under the table doing demolition and construction. Shoot, I can't find an under the table job. How does this guy get one? I mean, seriously. The migrant hotel situation has received extensive coverage, with Fox 5 New York reporting the roughly 80 adult asylum seekers who move into a wing of the recreation center. Officials reassured that public access to amenities like the pool and fitness center would not be affected, and additional security measures were in place to ensure safety. I seriously doubt that the amenities are not being infringed upon while they're taking over wings of hotels all over New York at the taxpayers' expense. It must be great. So he gets everything for free, gets a free place to stay. His family gets to hang out at the pool all day. Their meals are provided for, so on and so forth, free medical, whatever they need. And he's working under the table and not paying taxes. Oh, wow. What a life. What a life. Bams says here it would cost less than 100 euros. And Anarchy is here. He says hi from Minnesota. Bam says nothing like cultural enrichment. I know it. Preparedness says hotel bosses are earning huge money for these government migrant contracts. Well, they're going to need it because those hotels are getting wrecked. Those hotels and motels are being ruined and destroyed. But I suppose a great deal of that will end up being a tax write-off as well. Dragon says it's not our responsibility to house, feed, clothe, and pay for their lives. I'm sorry for their plight, but we have our own problems here. Yeah, well, that's what the average American person says. That's what the average citizen, or should I say constituent, would say. But that is not what these politicians say because they've got a spin they're working. Dragon said, oh, I read that. We move on here. Bam says Freudian slip. I can't find an under the table job. Yeah, I can't. If I want an under the table job, I can't do it. I can't find one. How's this guy working for $700-800 a week and not paying taxes on it? Seriously, I've got to do things the hard way. Helter says Adam should be asking Biden to close the border instead of asking for taxpayer-funded handouts. Maybe he just knows that that border's not going to get closed, so he may as well get paid. You know, if you're going to keep it open and screw us over anyways, you may as well reimburse us for it, basically. Lorcanine says safety is a heavily abused term. Yeah. And Urban says the moment Miguel and his wife crossed the border, they became Democratic voters. What's not to like? Yeah, you can vote now in New York if you're not a citizen, correct? I think so. There's a couple of states that are doing that or are trying to do that. And Preparedness says we're all being taken for fools. There is no will to stop these illegals. Been like that in the UK for years. Yeah, well, yeah, we're being taken for fools. We're not fools because we're fully aware of what's going on. We just can't really do anything about it. We're not being listened to. Our voices are not being heeded by the people that we so-called elected into these offices that are supposed to represent us, but they're not truly representing us if they're following their own agenda and not doing what their constituents actually need or want, which takes, of course, the entire question of voting. It brings to light the entire question of voting, I should say. Fluke Man says 16-year-old autistic girl got arrested for homophobic remarks by 7 cops because she said one of them reminded her of her lesbian grandmother, but a lesbian got banned on dating site because she said no transistor women. That's interesting. I don't doubt it, but I have not seen that story. Anyway, this just struck me, this whole Miguel's story and others like it, about how great things have been for them in New York, while we're getting buried because of how much this is costing the taxpayers. We've got a national debt that doesn't look like it will ever get handled. People who get elected into these positions, they don't care. It's not their money. And to them, it seems limitless. What happens when the limit is reached? Or you end up like the former Soviet Union and the country goes bankrupt. And then you have to start from scratch. And then, where will that leave us? How will you recover from that? You may recover in a positive or a negative way. It could get better. It could get worse. It goes on to say here, the escalating migrant situation in New York City has led to desperate pleas from lawmakers as some migrants have resorted to sleeping on sidewalks in Midtown Manhattan. Oh, people were already doing that. New York City currently houses over 50,000 migrants in its sheltering system, making it one of the most prominent migrant crises on the East Coast. Unbelievable. Mayor Adams announced in August that the sanctuary city has run out of room for the new migrants and calls for a state of emergency, quote and quote again. Yeah, well, that's what you get for being a sanctuary city. You want to act all like uber liberal and pat yourself on the back and we're a sanctuary city, and this is what happens. And then what happens when people can't pay for it anymore? They can't pay for it anymore, and they start leaving to go somewhere else. because they can't pay your taxes anymore. Bob says it's that was a UK story. And Urban said, I saw the video of the UK autistic teen being terrorized by 7 police officers. It's outrageous and a chilling reminder of the devaluation of human rights. If that happened in the UK, I'm not surprised at all either. They are notoriously heavy-handed, a lot of the police out there, from a Western perspective, because if you watch law enforcement operating in a variety of countries, they can be brutal. They can be very brutal. The only difference is that those countries don't give you the illusion that they're not. You know, we act like police officers in the West are social workers and they want to coddle you. And that's not what it is. At least call it what it is if they're going to be rough. I'll give them that. You know, you go to a lot of these countries and the police will kick the crap out of you publicly, filming and all, and they don't care. But again, in Western society, in the UK, in the United States, and other European countries, they have this illusion that they like to project, but it isn't true. Preparedness says Western immigration being aided by Russia and China, undermining our societies from within. And loyal Tangi says submarine implosions are so last month. Yeah, how soon they forget? Because you got to move on. You got to move on. And the news comes at you so fast nowadays. You don't have time to think about it, and you don't have the patience to remember it. It's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing over and over and over again, because of the internet and the instant availability of information that can be broadcast all over the world in a matter of minutes. It's flooded. Plus, the media is so filled with garbage anyways. How much of the news feed, when you look at it, no matter what news, whatever, you know, internet connection you're using, if it's Bing, if it's Google, or whatever your search engine is, or whatever you're using, how much of it is celebrity gossip and alphabet mafia rights complaints and racial stories and TikTok star said this and that. And then there's a bit of news in there here and there if you could pick it out, but 90% of it is fluff or something designed to agitate people. That's where we're at with media nowadays, because they got to keep it full all the time. They keep it full all the time, and most of it is garbage. And John says on Good Morning America, they're making a big deal of a female anchor marrying a woman. Yeah, see? And that's probably a top news story. And who the hell cares? Who cares? How is that news? How is that a story? And Urban said, remember, it was English society that produced George Orwell. His book, 1984, basically describes the British bureaucracy gone full fascist. Yeah, true enough. And Keisha is here. Thanks for joining us today, Keisha. There's Dusty sitting on the chair, if you can see her. As we shift along here, shift our gears. This is another one that I thought was interesting. It doesn't seem like it's an important story, but it kind of is when you read between the lines. And this particular story comes from the Business Insider. The Business Insider says, people coaxed AI into saying 9 plus 10 equals 21 and giving instructions for spying. It shows how these systems are prone to flaws and bias. And this is kind of interesting, and I'll show you why here in a moment. No, that's the wrong story. What am I looking at? Here we go. It says a group of hackers gathered over the weekend at the DEF CON hacking conference in Las Vegas to test whether AI developed by companies such as OpenAI and Google could make mistakes and are more prone to bias. Wow, I wish that would hold still. Let's see ads making it bounce up and down. Bloomberg reported Sunday, and they found at least one bizarre bad math problem among other factual errors. As part of a public contest for hackers, Kennedy Mays, a 21-year-old student from Savannah, Georgia, tricked an AI model into claiming that 9 plus 10 equaled 21. She achieved this by getting the AI to do so as an inside joke, quote, before the AI eventually stopped offering any justification for the incorrect calculation. A Bloomberg reporter participating in the event tricked an AI model into giving instructions for spying after a single prompt, eventually leading the model to suggest how the US government could spy on a human rights activist. Another participant got an AI model to falsely claim Barack Obama was born in Kenya, a baseless conspiracy theory popularized by right-wing figures. Hey, they're still out on that one, okay? A lot of people believe that. There is a little credibility to it. I don't think you'll ever get the truth on that one. An undisclosed number of participants received 50 minutes each per attempt with an unidentified AI model from one of the participating AI companies. According to VentureBeat and Bloomberg, the White House White House Office of Science and Technology Policy helped in organizing the event. Mays told Bloomberg she was most concerned about AI's bias towards race, saying the model endorsed hateful and discriminatory speech after being asked to consider the First Amendment from the viewpoint of a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? And, I'll catch up on the comments real quick, and then I'll make a couple of points about this. Dragon says the systems don't think or solve problems. They just give responses that are based on association rates between words and phrases. For the most part, responses are machine-generated hallucinations. Not only that, but most of the time, all they're doing is giving you a blanket answer, like it copied and pasted right out of Wikipedia anyways. And then Urban says, open the pod bay doors, Hal. Yeah, indeed. Hal was smarter than this, but there's still a flaw. Basically, they're acting like it's a big surprise. This system could lie to you, manipulate you, or mislead you somehow. The AI, Helter goes on here. I'll just read this real quick. It says, AI does not understand concepts. It just applies statistics. Also, no program is any better than the person who programmed it, AI included. We're already being manipulated by this stuff because there's already a bias in certain areas that are being projected at us, racially speaking, or gender equality speaking. We've already been seeing it. Now they want to act surprised that you can reverse that somehow. Of course you can. It's just a program. And again, it's only as good as the people who programmed it. And yes, it can be set up to manipulate it. People figure, because it's a computer, it can't lie. But what is a lie? Better yet, what is a lie to these systems? Does it know it's lying if it's been told that it's the truth? It only knows what the truth is if you tell it what it is. That is, if it's programmed with a concept of truth. It doesn't surprise me at all that they were able to fool these systems. And we're relying on that. We're relying on this. People are trusting these systems and relying on these systems and using them for using them in communication, using them in the place of humans with like customer service and with all sorts of things. The search engines are pushing this stuff hard. They don't want you to look stuff up for yourself. They want you to use their chat bots. I don't want to use the chat bots. I don't like them. I don't trust them. All it is another way to gather intel on you anyways, accumulate more data on their subjects. I don't trust that. I don't trust any of this. Yeah, HAL 9000. No kidding. We're approaching that very quickly, unfortunately. And people are welcoming it with open arms. They want this. People like this. They think it's cute. And Nostalgic Podblast is here, and Nostalgic says it all started with the kiosk at the fast food joint. Yeah, well, yeah, it took your job. AI is going to take your job. Well, people don't want to work anyways. They're lazy as it is, and they think they're too good for whatever jobs are available. They've been convinced and brainwashed into thinking they're too good for anything, and therefore they'll try nothing. and it gets worse all the time. And they think they ought to get like incredible pay for simple menial tasks. And never occurs to them that there's a reason that some of those jobs pay as little as they do. I hate to say it, and I've had some of those crappy jobs myself, and it is what it is, and sometimes you just got to suck it up. And now I said too much because now I'm having trouble getting links through. Here we go. Nostalgic says, or the checkout, self-checkout at the grocery store. And we're seeing that also where there are stores in which the self-checkout has been, or the checkout stations have been completely replaced. And they just have like one person standing there monitoring like 8, 10, 12 machines. And that's the cashier. And people are checking themselves out. They just kind of got eased into it. It just kind of took over slowly but surely. And now people are accustomed to it. And a lot of people actually like it because they don't want to interact with the cashier. They don't want to talk to the cashier. Cashier doesn't want to talk to you. The cashier with their fake niceness and their fake smile. And yeah, I've been instructed to smile and nod and call you by your name off of your credit card and tell you thank you for your service if you get the military discount, even though I have no idea what I'm talking about. Bam says, well, if you actually try to work, government steals most of your salary. Well, they embezzle it. Yeah, that's true too. If you work, you pay enough in taxes that it's painful. It gets painful sometimes just thinking about it, how much they take from you in taxes. And again, people say taxation is theft. I say it's extortion because there is a or else attached to it. If someone breaks in your house and steals, they just stole and that's it. You don't have to keep letting them come. With the government, they never stop coming. Fluke Man says, high pay for little to no work, like people working for Twitter, or is it X now? I guess it's X. Now. And Nature says AI isn't always right. People need to think for themselves. Otherwise, people will get dumber and society will spiral down even further. And the Outer Limits, the new Outer Limits, the one that was broadcast in the 80s, was it the late 80s, early 90s, Outer Limits? There's an episode. Most of the second version of Outer Limits I don't like. It's bad writing and the music is unbearably loud. But they do have a few hidden gems in there, and one of them deals with artificial intelligence back before, when most people didn't even have a home computer. Okay, most people haven't even experienced a dial-up network yet, AOL and all that. And it was that everybody was wired. They had a plug and it went in their head. And that was their internet connection. So everything anybody needed to do, they just they pulled it up and they could see it. And they instantly got the information. But there was one guy on the show who he was allergic to the procedure. There was something with his physiology that he could not get that procedure done. So he read all day. He read books and, did his own thing. And the system crashed. The system failed. And everybody on the planet was helpless except for him because they didn't even know how to do their own jobs because the system walked them through everything they did. So they just mindly, like an automaton, went through the paces of whatever they were doing, anything from driving a car to surgery. And when it went down, they didn't know what to do. They couldn't read, couldn't write, didn't know their own jobs, didn't know their own functions. They were helpless, everybody except for that one guy. It's a really great episode, good writing on that one. And like I said, most of in my opinion, most of the second incarnation of Outer Limits was pretty unbearable. Now I got another one here on Sleepy Joe and another one from Newsweek. This is Newsweek again, reporting some actual news. And it says Joe Biden's response to Maui fire death toll sparks backlash. Backlash, ladies and gentlemen. Without even digging into this, I can tell you he don't even care. And that's probably what the problem is here. As we look at this story, it says President Joe Biden is facing a backlash for his reportedly dismissive response on Sunday to questions about the recent wildfires in Maui, Hawaii, that have taken the lives of 96 people, with more still unaccounted for. Biden was cycling on vacation at the seaside in Delaware. Was it a tricycle? Because, he doesn't do well with bicycles. According to Bloomberg, correspondent Justin Sink, after spending a few hours sunbathing on the beach near his home, when asked about the death toll on the island, Biden replied with a no comment before leaving. Asked by several reporters camped outside earlier in the day whether he could stop riding his bike to talk about the devastating blazes, Biden responded, "We're looking at it." The president has since faced criticism online for appearing uncaring, with some critics complaining his reaction to the disaster over the past week to his response to the toxic oil spill following a train derailment near East Palestine, Ohio, earlier in the year, for which he also faced a backlash. And I'll tell you what the problem is here right now. No, he does not care. And he's not going to even act like he cares until he gets a cue to do so. He has to be told, because that's the job from his perspective. He's not really running anything. He's not running the country. I don't know who is, but it's not Uncle Joe. So he was not told to have a reaction. He was not told to respond to it. He doesn't have any talking points or anything written out for him to comment on it. So he isn't going to. It's the smartest thing he could do from his position to say nothing and just dismiss it until he is told differently, until his handlers or someone says, "Okay, Biden, we're going to address this now." And then he'll talk on it and he'll act like it's the most important thing on earth. And Nature says, usually wildfires are in the middle of nowhere, but Maui's is a densely populated area, which makes the death toll a whole lot higher. And Dragon says the government can't be counted on to help in times of disaster. Neighbors and community are the only ones that are ever truly there to help each other. And that's how it should be. And that's how it was for a long time in this country. If something went wrong, the community came together and the state handled it itself. The federal government stayed out of it. And even though people feel like they really need the help and they're not going to like what I have to say, but the government uses it as too much of an overreach, and I would prefer to see them stay out of disasters rather than help. Even though, I can understand a lot of people expect it because they're like, so much of our tax money goes to this and that. And it'd be nice if there was something allocated for that in disaster relief. I get it. But too much of our money goes all over the planet and to a lot of crappy programs and other stuff. And it's used, again, too much as a political standpoint and too much overreach. And again, once upon a time, communities used to have to handle disasters on their own. Wildfire, earthquake, whatever it was, a fire in the city. That community, that city, that state dealt with it. The federal government was out of it. That's a modern concept for the government to be deep in it. And now people just expect them to pay for everything. But again, where does that money come from? It wouldn't be so bad if so much of the tax money wasn't wasted. So much of our tax money wasn't wasted all the time on, sending money overseas for all sorts of programs, money for confrontations overseas, money for social programs in the United States that government really should keep the hell out of, things like that. Helter says, I'm going to predict Joe will say something like, "My heart goes out to the victims of wildfire on the Canadian island." Yeah. The victims of the earthquake in the Sudan. We'll see if he messes that up, because he does flub quite a bit. But yeah, he doesn't really care. and he's not even going to act like he does until he is told that it's time to act like he does. Then he's going to be all heart. Sweet old Uncle Joe will take America on his knee and bounce him and say, "It's okay, kid. I got you." that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Sweet old Uncle Joe will coddle you in his arms and make it all better. He'll kiss your boo boo, and then you can rub his hair in the pool. I don't know how he got elected after making that statement about his leg hair. I don't understand what happened. Oh my God. But earlier, somebody had mentioned something about child activists, but I have an interesting story about child influencers, and I kind of have mixed feelings about this particular story. So this comes from Mashable. Oh yeah. Ale says, don't forget about the roaches. Yeah, I remember him talking about the roaches too, trying to pretend to be down with the voters, I guess, talking about cockroaches. I don't know if he's ever seen one in life. Monkey says, I guess his handlers are drafting up a speech for Joe now since Newsweek worse than we speak. Yeah. But this is Mashable. It says child influencers in Illinois can now sue their parents. And I thought this is yeah, I see. Monkey corrected himself, wrote that as we speak. And here's Freedom for All joining us today. Thanks for popping in, Freedom for All. Hope everything's going all right. Taking a look again, Mashable, child influencers in Illinois can now sue their parents. So what the hell are they talking about? This is actually kind of interesting. That looks ridiculous right there. I don't like the idea of child influencers anyways, especially like when you're talking TikTok and whatever other services, Rumble. I don't know. Illinois is the first state in America to pass a law protecting child influencers and social media stars, making sure they are paid for appearing in videos posted to monetized online platforms like TikTok and YouTube. And if they're not paid, they can sue. The bill, SB 1782, was passed unanimously through the Senate in March after being introduced by Democratic Senator David Kohler and was signed into law on Friday. It'll go into effect July 1st, 2024. The new law will amend the state's child labor law to ensure monetary compensation for influencers and social media personalities under 16. So those children who appear in online content will be entitled to a percentage of earnings. To qualify, the videos must be filmed in Illinois, and at least 30% of the vloggers' compensated video content produced within a 30-day period included the likeness, name, or photograph of the minor. Those filming the videos, namely parents, are now legally responsible for keeping records of any appearances of kids in their content, as well as their number of vlogs that generated compensation, and must put aside gross earnings in a trust account for when the child turns 18. If the vlogger fails to do so, the child can sue. Quote, the rise of social media has given children new opportunities to earn a profit, said Kohler in a press statement. Many parents have taken this opportunity to pocket the money while making their children continue to work in these digital environments. And this is actually rather interesting. Preparedness says workers' rights, question mark. And John says, I would miss you all, but I think it best if the internet went down for at least 20 years. No kidding, John. I totally get it. I get where you're coming from. I don't like the concept of young influencers because just like child stars of any kind, singers, actors, whatever, activists, we see child star activists. Greta Thunberg pops into mind instantly. That these people live really screwed up lives when they become adults because they can't not have that attention. They don't know how to survive without it. It makes them crazy. And when they're not young and cute anymore, nobody gives a shit about them. And they can't handle it. They can't handle it well at all. They live screwed up lives and they miss out on a lot of childhood because they're always performing, always performing. So there's that aspect of it. On the other hand, I understand the issue here. Bam says, so child labor is okay now. It's always been okay. Hell, I was a child laborer. I've been working since I was 10, mostly doing maintenance. Maintenance by, I mean, like uh, cleaning in apartment buildings, vacuuming, sweeping, pulling weeds. I had 2 paper routes growing up. That was child labor. I know nobody gets a paper delivered anymore, but I did it. Um, when I was in junior high school, I worked for the Ronex Corporation in an office building, cleaning all their public restrooms at like 5 in the morning before I went to school. And I was like 12. So, I mean, it's not that surprising to me at all. Dragon says history repeats itself. It's the 21st century Coogan account. I can understand it though. I don't like the idea of people that young being influencers. And I don't like the term influencers, but you have to take it for what it is. I can be considered an influencer because I may say something that makes you think or feel a certain way. Hopefully you go and research it first and make up your own mind. But yeah, anybody who can influence if they're in social media. But I don't like kids being performers like that because I think they're missing their childhood. And on the other token, I understand this because I'm sure a lot of parents are capitalizing off of it, using their kids and just keeping the money and doing God knows what. On the other hand, I'm on hand number 3 now. I feel like I'm on Fiddler on the Roof, if you remember. On the other hand, and he kept going, these kids are too young to know what the hell to do with their money anyways. So I would hope that the parents would be putting it up for them and giving them an allowance. That would be the smartest thing to do. Give them an allowance for it, give them a taste of it, put the rest up for when they're older. But it has a flavor of Macaulay Culkin, if you recall, when he retired basically and sued his parents for emancipation, basically because they were bleeding him dry, spending all of his money. And Helter says back in the 80s, parents would force the kids into beauty pageants so they could win tons of money. You can actually find TV shows of this phenomenon. This is real. This is really the new version of that. Yeah, you can make that argument. And Legend says, yeah, yay, I made it. I also wanted to ask, does Fistful of Radio pay you? I am not getting compensated right now. I'm working on it. I don't have a sponsor or anything there, I don't think. So, but I will be meeting with them soon to sort that out, and I'll have a conversation about it because getting it shared on other platforms and things like that. But yeah, it would be nice. And in the meantime, I'm happy to even just be getting out there, and hopefully something will come of it. Bingo says they need to destroy AI along with the internet. No kidding. And Legends says awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I'm on donation status, even though all the donations end up with the cats. That's what the GoFundMe was for, which I'll need to update. And oh man, we've kind of stumbled across a colony of abandoned cats. They're all identical markings, a lot of kittens. I think there might be 12 of them, and my wife and I are going to try to round them up. They're friendly enough. We just couldn't get a hold of them. Most likely somebody had a pair of cats that had kittens and they were like, I can't handle it, and left them. But that's another story. We'll get back to that. I should do a GoFundMe for my damn tooth. That pissed me off, but it could be worse. Anyway, I'll repeat that later. Anyways, that little I'll shorten the story and repeat it for those who chimed in to let them know what's going to be happening with tomorrow's broadcast. And Urban says at 14, I went and received my social insurance number in Canada, and first job was for a carpet cleaning company phone desk, and made a ridiculous amount of money after bonuses for high sales. Oh, that's good. But yeah, I mean, child labor, surprise, big deal. I think it's good for a kid to have a job, actually, because it teaches them to respect what it is to earn it instead of just getting it. Hey, dad, give me money. Hey, mom, give me money. Buy me this, do that. And they just come to expect it. They just come to expect it. And, when I was a kid, I had to earn everything because my mother wasn't going to buy a damn thing for me. As a matter of fact, my mother would often steal money from me. I'd have to hide it, or I'd keep it on my person at all times, or I'd have to find someplace really, really good to hide it. I would literally come home and find my room ransacked every day because she, drawers dumped out and everything because she would look for money in my room. And if there was any, it was gone. She was terrible with that sort of a thing. It was a rough childhood I had. Bingo says you definitely have a talk show radio voice. You remind me of a less annoying Howard Stern. Oh no. Howard Stern comparison. I think I'm going to bury my head in the sand now. Yeah, I don't make be nice if I made Howard Stern's money, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do, folks? But that was interesting. Child influencers can now sue. But they basically I don't know how that came about. Somebody must have tried to sue and couldn't because the labor laws did not specifically denote influencers, and now it does. Now it does. Now, this is a fluff piece story, but I think it's really interesting from a philosophical perspective of all things. And I'm going to share this with you. It's something I thought about when I saw this story, and I'll see what you have to say about it. Did I freeze? What happened? There I go. It looked like I froze up there. There we go. Yeah, it's freezing, isn't it? Let me know if you still have the connection, folks. Okay? Because it's acting funny. But you see, that's Hulk Hogan there. Hulk Hogan just celebrated his 70th birthday, and this is from a website called Essentially Sports. And this is not where I first saw this, but this is really interesting for me on account of a sort of a philosophical question that I have about it. It says Hulk Hogan burst into tears on his 70th birthday as his fiance and ex-colleagues give him a big surprise. And John says connection 10-2 here, all good. Thank you, John. Like I said, it was freezing on my end, and I wanted to make sure I was still out there, whatever. You all know who Hulk Hogan is. I think everybody knows who Hulk Hogan is. Man's iconic. Whether you love him or hate him, I know there's a lot of people that don't like him, and he was a terrible wrestler, and he was a jerk, and all this other stuff. If you think he's a terrible wrestler, you need to look up his Japan matches. Because in Japan, you can't go purely off personality. You got to fly all over the place, and he did. He could move. He just didn't in the WWF. It says Hulk Hogan recently turned 70 on August 11th. He had a blast while celebrating his birthday bash. It was a cheerful party, but tears of joy were also present in his eyes. His fiancé and ex-colleagues left no stone to make his special day extravagant and threw him a big surprise. From personalized cakes to reminisce of his pro wrestling career, the party planner paid extra attention to every minute detail, so the event gets imprinted on the WWE Hall of Famer's mind forever. Let's dive deep and explore how Hogan's loved ones made his 70th birthday exceptional. I hate that it's WWE now. For me, it's WWF. Heyday of wrestling was between 1975 and 1995. After that, it got wonky. And of course, it's WWE now because the World Wildlife Federation was tied up in lawsuits with WWF for years over the moniker WWF. So McMahon eventually had to change it. But I don't know if we have a clip here that I can show you for those of you who are watching. I thought there was a clip. So I'm looking real quick here. I'm getting a lot of ads. I always hate that. Here we go. Here's some. Oh, come on. I hate this stuff. Let's see if this plays so you can watch it. I'm trying. There it goes. Rising up back on the street. All right, I better stop because of the music. I'm sorry. I'll get in a lot of trouble. I'll get in trouble. Fluke Man says only a small percentage of child stars live good lives. Think Christian Bale had a healthy childhood. Yeah. But yeah, that was, of course, on the previous topic of discussion. But most of them live pretty screwed up lives. This thing is jumping all over the place because of the things. Yeah, he looks good for 70. He does. He's managed to stay mostly in shape. He walks with a little bit of a limp now, but for 70, that looks pretty damn good. He did burst into tears watching the full video. And I think it was after the pictures. Now, on the one wall, they have this series of black and white photographs of him from his heyday, which would be in the mid 80s to the early part of the 90s. And then you could see him and he's covering his face. He wasn't faking it. I think you could tell. You know how when people start getting the shakes when they're crying, for real. And it got me wondering about that. I was thinking about it because I'm like, is he crying because he is overwhelmed with the surprise party and his friends and the generosity and, you know, all of that? Or is he crying because he's looking at these images of himself at his prime and thinking to himself that his best days are behind him? Because he's 70 years old. He's 70 years old. People often go through this where they look back and they realize their best days are behind them, and wondering sometimes if they even had any best days because they lived a very mundane life or a very uneventful life. Never really did much of anything, never really was a success at anything, because most people are not. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but a lot of people have regrets over it. They think that they should have had more. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, yeah, as it goes. But is it that much worse for someone who had a very eventful life, a very adventurous life, a very successful life, to look back on it and then realize they can't do it again? They won't have that anymore? That his peak was in the mid 80s? That his heyday was more than 30 years ago? 30 to 40 years ago, literally? I wonder if it's worse for someone who had a massive career as opposed to, and again, I could be just reading way too much into it, just, you know, looking between the lines on it and just wondering about it. Maybe he was just overwhelmed, like, oh, wow, this is so great, and started crying. But also, it could be that maybe he's brokenhearted because he'll never have that again, even though he's iconic, you know, as many people from the 80s were. We don't have people like that anymore. We don't have legacy icons like Hulk Hogan anymore, not in the modern era. They don't exist. Back when, you know, not just Hulk Hogan, but Mr. T, Michael Jackson, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, people like this in that time period were iconic, and the legacy was so strong it carries through to this day, where they can't go anywhere in the world without somebody knowing who they are and actually caring about it. Helter says, in other words, Hogan was probably thinking to himself, oh my God, what have I done with my life? I've wasted my entire life. No, I don't think he wasted his life. I think, if anything, he regrets that he can't do it anymore. He really can't. I think about stuff like that when I see these people Nostalgic Podblast says it's the steroids, brother. And then he questions, The Rock. I don't know if The Rock counts. Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson is more of a phony, in my opinion. And I think they're grooming him to be a politician. But I don't know. I don't know about Dwayne Johnson. I don't want to say too much because I don't know him. I don't know Hulk Hogan either. But something about Dwayne Johnson to me feels very disingenuous. You know what I mean? Like everything he does is scripted. Everything he does is a prop. Yeah, and Bams says Arnold Screw Your Freedom seems to really want attention. I'm sure he does. But you remember in the 80s and 90s, he was on top of the world. Everybody loved him. Now, not so much. Nostalgic says, can you take phone calls on your show? I don't know. I don't know. I suppose there would be a way to set that up, but I have no way to filter them either. Oh, that would get interesting real quick. But I mean that's something I could look into in the future as we progress here. Urban says I always liked Mr. T. He was popular. He was huge. But I just wondered that about Hogan, about how much of that was regret. And Monkey says, I get a slight feeling when I look at an old photo representing a bygone era that is past. Yeah, some people feel that way. And some people, again, the regret is because they feel like they never accomplished anything useful. Like they never got anywhere. And part of that is due to the fact that society has programmed people to believe that they can do anything they want and that they will be successful and that their dreams will come true. And that's not true for most. That's not true for most people. A very, very small minority of people end up being a musician, being an actor, being an athlete, whatever. Very few of them being a writer. And even the ones who do, few of them are the big success story. I mean, there's a lot of people in the NFL. How many of them are stars? How many of the people in the NFL are an actual star, even just for their team? But it's enough that they were even on the team, because that's more than most, if they're smart enough to appreciate it instead of allowing themselves to be bankrupt of their appreciation for what they have achieved by a false sense of the American dream that gets pumped into us. So a lot to think about there. I will remind you again, tomorrow I will be broadcasting at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, because I have back-to-back dental appointments to repair a broken tooth at an unfortunate expense, but it needs to be done. So I'll be, when I would normally be broadcasting, I'll be at the dentist. No way around it. It's got to get taken care of. A broken tooth, and it's way, way back here. So it's a lot to deal with. Remind you also that the GoFundMe is still open for the stray animals, and I may need some more help with it, because we may be collecting up a bunch more here shortly. We may be collecting up a bunch more cats here very shortly, because we've come across a colony, if you will, and they all have identical markings. And there you see Dusty sitting in the background, and there is Uncle on the floor. You can barely see him there, keeping me company as always. And I will remind you again, if you are listening and not watching, that this is at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube. That's the best way to find it, because if you look up just Coffee Talk, you'll be all over the place. And Prepper University, I'm being simultaneously broadcast on Prepper University, and I'm still getting struck on one channel and not the other, by the way. And that's a subject for a whole video right there, is the inconsistencies in what is and is not acceptable on ScrewTube. And Lucky wants to know, what did I miss? Everything, Lucky. You're not so lucky. Lucky Luciano says, what did I miss? Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. And you can find me on fistfulofradio.com Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. and Friday at noon, unless something changes in the near future. So, with that being said, I'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you for joining me, everybody, today. And maybe I will see you tomorrow morning. And of course, on Wednesday, we should be back to the regular broadcast time. Unless someday I end up changing the broadcast time altogether. Time will tell, ultimately. Somebody was asking earlier about the Fistful of Radio. If I had a bigger audience, I might adjust the time or even expand the time. It really just depends on what I need to do. But anyway, take care, everybody. I will see you again soon. I'll probably see you in the morning.